Most people walk into retirement with a number in their heads. Maybe it is 1 million, maybe it is 2 million, maybe it is even more. But what if the number you think you need is completely wrong? What if you could retire comfortably with far less than you ever imagined? That is the question that has sparked endless debates, and today we are going to break it apart piece by piece. In the personal finance world, one idea has shocked more people than almost anything else: the claim that you could retire with just $125,000 invested. It sounds impossible. It sounds reckless. It even sounds absurd when most financial experts insist you need $1 to $3 million before you can even begin thinking about leaving work behind. But when you start running the numbers, when you look at how income streams actually combine, and when you examine how retirement spending truly works, the picture becomes much more interesting. Welcome to Mike Compound. Today, we're going to take the retirement math popularized by Dave Ramsey and put it under a microscope. His argument is that you can withdraw substantially more than the classic 4% rule suggests, far more. And somehow, the math still holds up. In fact, it might make more sense than most people realize. The question is why? Before we dive deeper, this is a conversation that matters. There is a real financial struggle happening across the country, and understanding the truth behind retirement numbers could be life-changing for millions. The heart of Dave Ramsey's argument is simple. If your investments grow fast enough, you can safely withdraw more each year without running out of money. Most people are familiar with the traditional 4% rule. It was designed to withstand the worst economic periods in modern history, assuming a portfolio mixed with both stocks and bonds. That model says you can withdraw 4% in your first year of retirement, then adjust for inflation afterward, and your portfolio should last at least 30 years. It is safe, conservative, and time-tested. But Ramsey challenges this idea by leaning on a different assumption: higher growth. He argues that if your portfolio averages a 12% annual return, withdrawing 8% is not unreasonable. For example, if you had $500,000 invested and earned 12%, that is $60,000 in gains. Withdrawing $40,000 would still leave part of the growth untouched, allowing your portfolio to continue compounding. Most people believe they need a $1 million portfolio to generate that level of income, and they would, under the 4% rule. But when you compare a portfolio averaging 10% returns, roughly the long-term historical performance of the S&P 500 before inflation, the math shifts. A 10% average return supports something closer to a 6% withdrawal rate, leaving 4% to offset rising costs. This leftover growth functions as a buffer. Your portfolio does not simply stay alive, it grows in real terms, even as you draw money from it. And if the portfolio continues averaging 12%, your withdrawals could rise roughly 4% every year without eroding your long-term financial stability. On the surface, it sounds bold. But when compared side by side, the 8% strategy and the 4% model share more similarities than most people think. At this point, the big question emerges: is a 12% annual return actually realistic? Critics argue that such numbers are overly optimistic, even dangerous. But Ramsey's stance comes from decades of investing heavily in one specific category: growth stock mutual funds. These are funds filled with companies that expand aggressively. Businesses like Nvidia, Netflix, Amazon, and other innovators that have reshaped entire industries. Their explosive growth can drive long-term returns far beyond the broad market's average. To put this into context, consider the past performance of a growth-focused ETF like Vanguard's VUG. Over long stretches, it has averaged around 12% annually, while the standard S&P 500 sits closer to 10%. The difference may seem small, but compounded over a lifetime, it is enormous. A portfolio growing at 12% doubles roughly every 6 years, compared with 7 years at 10%. That single year of acceleration adds up to massive gains over time. However, there is a trade-off. Growth funds are extremely volatile. When the market falls, they fall harder. A broad market crash of 30% might hit a growth-heavy portfolio with losses of 40 or even 50%. Imagine starting the year with $100,000 invested and watching it drop to $50,000 by mid-year. Meanwhile, someone invested only in the S&P 500 might still have $70,000 left. These dramatic swings can be emotionally brutal. It is easy to panic, sell, and lock in losses permanently. Yet historically, the deepest crashes have often been followed by the strongest recoveries, especially in the growth sector. That is why Ramsey leans into these funds, because the long-term upside, in his view, outweighs the short-term turbulence. Still, achieving those returns requires resilience, discipline, and the ability to stay invested even when your balance is falling fast. Now let's move from theory to something more concrete. What does this actually look like in the real world? How could a retired couple live comfortably with only $125,000 invested? At first glance, it sounds unrealistic. But when you layer in the way most retirees structure their income, the math suddenly becomes far more reasonable. According to data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, households headed by someone aged 65 or older spend around $58,000 per year. That number includes everything: housing, groceries, travel, healthcare, transportation, and the hundreds of small expenses that come with everyday life. And for many retirees, that lifestyle is more than comfortable, especially for those who own their homes outright or have modest mortgage and utility costs. Now, consider Social Security. The average benefit today is roughly $2,000 per month per person, meaning a couple can receive around $48,000 per year combined. That already covers the majority of their annual spending. The remaining gap is just $10,000. Using Ramsey's 8% withdrawal approach, producing $10,000 in yearly income requires an investment portfolio of only $125. Suddenly, the idea does not seem so far-fetched. Two income sources, Social Security and investment withdrawals, come together to create a stable, livable retirement income. And with thoughtful tax planning, much of that money can even be received tax-free. It is a setup where modest savings, combined with guaranteed income and disciplined withdrawals, allow retirees to maintain a lifestyle that feels complete, balanced, and secure. To understand why there is so much disagreement about withdrawal rates, you have to look at how the original 4% rule was created. Financial planner Bill Bengen developed it in the 1990s by studying the worst historical periods of market downturns and inflation. His goal was not to find an average outcome, but to identify a withdrawal rate that would survive even the most punishing 30-year retirements imaginable. Under that scenario, withdrawing 4% in the first year and adjusting for inflation afterward allowed portfolios to survive every crisis analyzed. But here's the part most people overlook. Bengen later updated his own stance. After reviewing new data and considering more flexible spending patterns, he stated that many retirees could safely withdraw closer to 5%, especially if they are willing to scale back spending during poor market conditions. In other words, adaptability, not a fixed percentage, is what truly protects a retirement plan. This idea becomes even more important when considering the risks Ramsey's model faces. An 8% withdrawal rate assumes long-term market behavior will remain favorable, but the markets are unpredictable. Great years, devastating years, and flat years all come in unpredictable cycles. Inflation can surge, stocks can crash, and the sequence of returns, the order in which good and bad years occur, can dramatically affect how long a portfolio lasts. Imagine retiring right before a major downturn. Your portfolio takes a sharp hit, and if you continue withdrawing at the same rate, you accelerate the damage. In those moments, flexibility is essential. Cutting back spending temporarily, delaying a big trip, postponing a large purchase, or even working part-time for a short period can allow your portfolio the breathing room it needs to recover. And that is the truth behind both the 4% and 8% models. Neither number is a guarantee. What matters is your ability to adapt when life, and the market, does not follow the plan. So where does all of this leave us? On one side, Ramsey's strategy offers freedom, the ability to retire earlier, the option to rely on less savings, and the confidence that high-growth investing can carry you farther than traditional models suggest. But it demands discipline, emotional strength, and a willingness to endure volatility without losing faith. On the other side, the 4% rule emphasizes caution. It prioritizes stability and survival, even in the worst historical conditions. But it may also cause people to save far more than they will ever need, pushing retirement farther and farther away. And that introduces a different kind of risk, one that rarely gets talked about, the risk of saving so aggressively that you postpone the very life you are trying to protect. The risk of working longer than necessary, the risk of missing experiences you cannot get back. What good is having more money than you will ever spend if you are too exhausted or too old to enjoy the years you worked so hard for? That is why the real solution is not a perfect percentage. It is perspective. Retirement planning is not about following a single formula. It is about understanding your own spending, your own comfort level, your own tolerance for market swings, and your ability to adjust when times get tough. Most people already behave this way without thinking about it, tightening the budget when the economy slows, delaying big purchases after a downturn, and pushing retirement a little later if the numbers do not feel right. You may not need a seven-figure portfolio to retire well. You may not need to fear volatility as much as you think. What you truly need is flexibility, self-awareness, and a willingness to adapt. Because the real key to lasting financial independence is not a number, it is the mindset behind it.
Mindset. It's the key to financial independence.